وَمَا قَدَرُ اللَّهَ حَقَّ قَدْرِهِ. You want to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you don't limit Him and reduce Him to your own notions of what real is. Assalamu alaikum. Got a question on Facebook, through Facebook. And you can find the link for my Facebook page in the description. This is probably your best bet for turning my attention to questions you feel I might have something beneficial to say about. And this question comes from Sonia. Actually, Sonia sent a bunch of questions, but because we're trying to keep these videos short and kind of dealing with one thing at a time, I mean, the whole thing is scattered thoughts. The series is scattered thoughts. I can't make scattered thoughts within a scattered thoughts video. It's like Inception. Scattered thoughts within scattered thoughts. I digress. Anyways, scatteredception. How can we understand creatures like angels, jinn, shayateen? Was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam experiencing a type of hallucination in the cave of Hira? He would hear ringing bells and see Jibreel alayhi salam on the horizon. How do we understand these things? Well, you understand them based on one of the very first verses you read in the Quran when you recite the Quran. After the Fatiha, where you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance, He describes in Surah Al-Baqarah at the beginning of it who the believers are. And who are the believers? الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. Those who believe in the unseen. One of the first fundamental things you have to accept as a Muslim, as a believer generally, that there is such a thing called the unseen. It's the realm that you don't have sensory access to. If you rely only on your senses, you have access to through other means, but not through your material senses. But the question made me think of another verse actually in Surah Al-An'am, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا قَدَرُ اللَّهَ حَقَّ قَدْرِهِ إِذْ قَالُوا مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَى بَشَرٍ مِّن شَيْءٍ. That they did not give Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala His true measure, His true accounting. They did not give Him the proper attribute. They did not know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He should be known. When they claimed, and in this it addresses to the disbelievers, that Allah did not reveal, did not descend any revelation upon any human being at all. Now, if you look at the books of tafsir, something like Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi, he does like a long treatment on this verse. And one of the things he mentions is that one of the qualities of disbelievers who don't know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He should be known, is that they reject anything that goes against their, their experience. Al-ada is the word that he uses, which is just their normal day-to-day experience. Your normal day-to-day experience is that things happen in a particular sequence. Is that when you throw something up, it comes down. Gravity. That's your normal day-to-day experience. David Hume, a Scottish philosopher, and he's considered one of the forefathers of empiricism, he actually points out something called the problem of induction. And in it he says that the fact that you throw something up and it comes down, and you believe that to be the case the next time it happens, that does not necessarily mean it's inherent within the thing that you're doing that it has to perform that way. So there is nothing saying that it is necessary for something that when you throw it up, it has to come down. That is just your personal experience and the experience of multiple people, and we've just induced it, and we think that that's the way that it should work. Mind you, it's not something inherent within it that says it has to work that way. It's just the way that we experience the world. If you look at Nassim Nicholas Taleb in his book, The Black Swan, he begins it by pointing out that, and we're not talking about the movie here, we're talking about the philosopher economist. He begins the book by talking about, well, for millennia, people thought all swans were white until the first black swan was discovered. And then all of a sudden, millennia of so-called knowledge is no longer knowledge. It's just, well, that was just our experience. So how do we understand the creatures like jinn, angels, shayateen? These are creations like other creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah has created them. He mentions them in the Quran very explicitly. There is a whole surah dedicated to the jinn, Suratul Jinn. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also talks about وَإِصْصَرَفْنَا إِلَيْكَ نَفَرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ, that He sent a group of the jinn to the Prophet ﷺ for him to recite for them the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. so that they go back to their people, their jinn people, and share the tradition and deliver the message. That is the unseen. For us as believers, that doesn't give us an opening to acting in kind of, the only way I could describe it is silly. I saw this thing, I shared the image of it on my Twitter feed the other day. It's an Instagram page, and it's the wife of somebody, and she says this person, he runs what she called a jinn busting services. Who are you gonna call? Jinn busters. My God, I'm exposing myself for having some cultural know-how. Anyways, that is silly. That's ridiculous. Religion is being used for folkloric reasons, where people talk about jinn possession. And what's interesting about jinn possession, by the way, is if you look at the statistics, they're mostly women. It's as if jinn have nothing to do with the men. They just want to go after women. And it's usually only in places, actually, I've never seen it outside of places that have that don't have low education, low economic prosperity. It's a lot of superstition in these places. And that's where you find these things thriving. So for us as believers, what do we do with this realm? It's a realm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has informed us about. It's a creation. It has influences in the world. That's not to say that it doesn't influence the world, but it doesn't do it in a direct way where they come and you come in and you find things they can change your entire life in that way. There's a reason why you recite Surah Al-Falaq, for example, in the morning and in the evening. It's to protect yourself from whisperings, from evil forces, unseen forces. You know, we live in a time right now where it's really taboo. People don't like to admit this, but a lot of Muslims, out of the social pressure, especially if you're in college, university educated, PhD, well, you know what? I have a PhD in neuroscience. I've gone to the highest echelon of getting degrees in this field. I know my science. That doesn't make me someone who is going to capitulate to intellectual terrorism by liberal universities that want, and materialist thought that tells you there is only this thing that you feel, touch, hear, smell, things like that. There are other things in the world, and وَمَا قَدَرُ اللَّهَ حَقَّ قَدْرِهِ. You want to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you don't limit Him and reduce Him to your own notions of what real is. You're only exposed to part of reality. That's really what it is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has all reality, and He is al-haq ultimately. He is the real. Everything else could be an illusion, you could be in delusion, you could be in multiple things. So how do you understand these things? You accept their existence. The Prophet ﷺ was not hallucinating because the experiences he had, I'll give you an example. When he used to hear the ringing bell and he used to experience the wahi coming to him, there was actually a physical effect, an impact to it, where I believe it was Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that she felt his head. He was laying on her lap one day and the revelation came. She felt her leg was gonna break. That's how heavy. إِنَّا سُنُلْقِي عَلَيْكَ قَوْلًا ثَقِيلًا. She felt her head getting heavy. He was sweating profusely from it. And the Quran itself, when you recite it, it is not a nonsensical book. There's a lot of coherence to it. Even if at the outward it seems like scattered verses that deal with multiple themes, when you break it down and look into it, there's an internal structure to it that is all coherent, that is non-contradictory with each other, and that happened over a long period of time, 23 years. The Prophet ﷺ's life, they tried to say multiple things about him, and as if, like, this is another thing, as if we're so arrogant. We think that we have the knowledge today, that we can say what is hallucination and what is not, and people back then, we look at them with disdain. Like, these people don't know anything. They're such ignoramuses, nomads in the desert. You know what? They had knowledge back then. They had information. Human beings have not changed. Don't fall for this illusion of progress, technological progress, and equate it with human progress in that sense. People back then knew things, and they knew who's crazy, who's epileptic, who's not. They recognized these signs. Epilepsy is not a new thing. It's been around since the beginning of humanity, and people knew what these things are. And they tried to describe the Prophet ﷺ with multiple things, and they actually got together and said, what should we say about him? Should we call him Majnoon? And they said, no, he's not, because we know what Majnoon is. We know who's an insane, epileptic, hallucinating type of person is. He doesn't fit any of these qualities. And we're talking about disbelievers here. And they said, okay, should we call him a magician, a sorcerer? And they said, well, he doesn't really do the things the sorcerers do, but he has kind of a similar impact in that families divide up. Siblings divide up and go against each other because now they're adopting different beliefs. So let's call him a sorcerer. That's the closest thing they can call the Prophet ﷺ. So, I don't know, man, I'm going all over the place now. Listen, read the seerah, study the seerah, and go beyond, and I'm saying beyond the Googleizing it. I'm saying find yourself a teacher who understands the seerah, sit down with them and study the seerah in totality. It's kind of mind-boggling to me that we claim, many of us claim, that we're Muslims adhering to the tradition, we love the Prophet ﷺ, but then you ask about basic things about the Prophet ﷺ's life and you get crickets, silence. You love the Prophet ﷺ, you need to know, like, why do you love him? It has to go beyond just an emotional attachment to the Prophet ﷺ. You have to know the Messenger ﷺ at a deeper level than just being told you should love him. Anyways, long video. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Assalamu alaikum. So, now you've seen some of the videos. I'm going to be trying to post these scattered thoughts, I'm actually going to call it, because they're just scattered thoughts, as often as possible. I'm trying to go for a minimum of 4 times a week, but I'm trying to build this platform on YouTube. So I'm hoping that if you enjoy this content, that you would subscribe, like, comment below, and share this video, and tell your mommy, tell your daddy, tell your pops, tell your grandpa, tell your grandma, tell everybody. If there is any benefit that can be derived from these, I would really appreciate it if you can spread it.